She sat at the wrong table with a millionaire single dad, and that mistake became her destiny. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain was falling steadily over downtown Chicago that evening, the kind of rain that made the city glow in silver reflections. Inside a quiet cafe on Michigan Avenue, Ethan Carter sat alone by the window, his perfectly tailored suit unbothered by the storm outside. His phone buzzed with messages from the company board, all saying the same thing in different tones. You must marry before the end of the quarter to keep control of the family trust. Phew, he sighed, closing his eyes for a brief moment. Ethan had built Carter Holdings from the ground up after his father's passing. But the board by his late father's brother was waiting for a single mistake. A clause in the will gave them that chance. If Ethan Carter remains unmarried by age 35, voting control reverts to the board. 35 came tomorrow. Across town, Maya Nguyen was hurrying through the rain, clutching a thin coat around her shoulders. Her shoes were soaked, her hair sticking to her face. She had just been told to vacate the tiny basement room she had been renting. Her mother's medical bills were piling up, and the diner where she worked had cut her hours again. As lightning flashed above the skyline, she whispered to herself, "Please, just let tomorrow be better than today." That prayer would soon collide with Ethan Carter's desperation. The next morning, fate placed them in the same world for the first time. Maya arrived at the Carter penthouse to deliver cleaning supplies. She had filled in for her friend who was sick, unaware the place belonged to one of the wealthiest CEOs in the city. The elevator doors opened to a space that looked more like a museum than a home glass walls. Modern art, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond. She stood frozen, holding a dripping mop, afraid even to breathe too loud. Ethan entered the room, his phone pressed to his ear, his tone sharp. "Find me a name. I do not care who she is, as long as she signs the papers by midnight." He hung up and turned, and that was when he saw her. A soaked, wide-eyed young woman standing near the window, trying to apologize for being in the wrong place. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain beat harder against the glass, filling the silence. Then Ethan's voice softened. "You work for the cleaning service?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I was just leaving." "Too." He studied her for a long second, the frayed uniform, the trembling hands, the nervous honesty in her eyes. Something about her made him pause. She was real, no pretense, no agenda. Exactly what he needed. "Maya, is it?" he asked after glancing at her badge. "How would you like to make $50,000? Her heart stuttered. "Excuse me?" He walked to the counter, opened a leather folder, and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the contract that would change both their lives. "Marry me," he said calmly. "Just for 6 months. It is purely legal. You will live here, attend 5 events with me, and keep everything confidential. When the contract ends, you walk away with the money." Maya stared at him, as if he were insane. "This is some kind of joke, right?" "No joke," he replied. "I need a wife before midnight. You need financial security. We can help each other." The absurdity of the offer hung in the air between them. She should have walked away, but her mother's hospital invoice echoed in her head. The number was almost exactly $50,000. Finally, she said in a trembling voice, "And what happens if I say yes?" Ethan slid the paper toward her. "Then you sign here, you move in tonight, and you become Mrs. Carter, at least on paper." The clock on the wall ticked softly. Maya looked at the pen, then at the man in front of her. There was something cold in his eyes, but also something broken, as if he had forgotten how to trust anyone. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Inside, she reached for the pen. "I must be out of my mind," she whispered, and signed her name. Ethan's expression barely changed, but as he folded the contract, his jaw loosened just slightly, relief washing over him. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Carter." Maya exhaled, her hands still trembling. The rain began to slow outside, but for both of them, The storm had only just begun. The rain finally stopped the next morning, leaving the city washed clean under a pale gray sky. Inside the Carter penthouse, Maya stood by the enormous window, holding a cup of coffee she was too nervous to drink. The events of the night before still played in her mind like a film she could not pause. She had signed a contract. She was now, on paper, Mrs. Ethan Carter. The silence of the penthouse felt heavy. Every sound echoed the hum of the refrigerator, the slow tick of the wall clock, her own heartbeat. She had not slept much. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the line where she had signed her name. The door opened, and Ethan stepped in, perfectly composed in a dark suit. His tie was straight, his expression unreadable. "Good morning," he said simply. "Good morning," she answered, her voice almost a whisper. He set a folder on the counter. "Here are your new identification cards, a credit card for living expenses, and the schedule for the next week. You will attend 3 events with me before the board meeting. Dress appropriately. Claire, my assistant, will help you prepare." Maya blinked, overwhelmed. "You already had all this ready?" Ethan glanced at her. "I plan ahead. That is why I have a company, and not a pile of regrets." He paused, his eyes softening for just a fraction of a second. "You will not have to do anything personal. Just act as my wife in public. You will live here, but we will stay in separate rooms." She nodded quickly. "That is fine. I do not expect anything else." He hesitated before turning away. "Then we have an understanding." When he left, Maya let out a shaky breath. She looked around the vast living room, glass, steel, and quiet luxury. It was beautiful, but it felt like another planet. She thought of her mother in the small hospital room on the south side of the city. This is for her, she reminded herself. Just 6 months. Later that afternoon, Claire arrived. The assistant was tall, confident, and polite, but there was curiosity behind her professional smile. "So you are the new Mrs. Carter," she said, measuring Maya with her eyes. "You are not what I expected." "I'm not what anyone expects," Maya replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. Claire handed her a garment bag. "The first event is a charity dinner tomorrow night. Mr. Carter will pick you up at 7. Do not be late." When Maya opened the bag, she gasped. Inside was a gown the color of champagne, smooth silk that shimmered when she moved it. She had never worn anything like it. She touched the fabric with careful fingers, afraid it might disappear. That night, she stood before the mirror, practicing her smile. She searched for the right way to hold her hands, the right way to walk. Every movement felt foreign. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "You have survived worse." Down the hall, Ethan worked in his study, surrounded by screens of market data and legal documents. Yet his mind kept wandering to the woman now living under his roof. He told himself this was business, a simple arrangement. But something about her quiet strength, the way she looked at him, without fear or flattery, had unsettled him in ways he could not explain. He found himself pausing at the doorway of her room, listening to the faint sound of music through the wall. Her voice hummed softly along with an old tune. It was pure, unguarded. For the first time in years, Ethan smiled without meaning to. The next evening, the car waited at the building entrance. Maya stepped out in the gown, her hair pinned up neatly, a soft glow of nervous courage in her eyes. Ethan turned when he saw her, his usual composure cracking for just a heartbeat. "You look appropriate." He caught himself before finishing the sentence. "You look appropriate." She smiled faintly. "I will take that as a compliment." During the drive, neither spoke much. The city lights blurred past the window, and the silence between them grew softer, less sharp. When they arrived at the hotel ballroom, cameras flashed, voices called Ethan's name. He reached for her hand instinctively. Her fingers were cold but steady. He leaned closer and whispered, "Just smile and stand tall." "I can do that," she whispered back. As they stepped into the dazzling light, Maya realized something she had not expected. For the first time in years, she was not invisible. People looked at her not as a waitress or a struggling daughter, but as someone who mattered. The feeling scared her as much as it thrilled her. Ethan guided her through the crowd, his hand never leaving hers. From the outside, they looked perfect, every inch the power couple. But inside, both of them were fighting battles the other could not see. 6 months, she thought. Just 6 months. But deep down, neither of them knew that the contract they had signed last night had already started turning into something neither could control. The flash of cameras faded as Ethan and Maya moved deeper into the ballroom. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with champagne, and the murmur of conversation filled the air. Crystal chandeliers glowed above their heads, casting golden light on marble floors. Every guest in the room seemed to know Ethan Carter. Hands reached to shake his. Voices called his name with practiced charm. Maya stayed close beside him, keeping her smile steady. She remembered his words in the car. Just smile and stand tall. She did exactly that. But inside, her heart beat too fast. Every movement felt like a test. Every glance from those polished socialites seemed to weigh and measure her. She could almost hear their thoughts. Who is she? Where did he find her? Ethan leaned close, his voice calm and firm. "You are doing fine," he said quietly. "Fine?" she whispered back. "I feel like I might faint." He almost smiled, then faint gracefully. "The board members are watching." Tribally. At the far end of the room, a man with silver hair approached them. His tone was smooth, but his eyes were sharp. "Ethan, I see you finally took my advice. Marriage suits you." "Uncle Richard," Ethan replied evenly. "You never fail to appear where there is gossip." Richard laughed, turning his gaze to Maya. "And this must be your wife. You did not mention she was so young." Maya extended her hand politely. "It is very nice to meet you." Richard took it, his grip too tight, his smile too wide. "Be careful, my dear. The Carter family has a long history of complicated unions." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Enjoy the evening, uncle," he said flatly, guiding Maya away. Once they reached a quieter corner, she looked at him, unsure whether to speak. "Was that the man who will decide your future with the company?" Ethan nodded once. "He holds the largest share after mine, and he will do anything to take control." Tuda. Maya glanced around the glittering room. "And this dinner is his battlefield." "Exactly," Ethan said. "That is why you are here. To prove I have stability. To make them believe." Her stomach twisted. "So I am part of your defense strategy." He turned to her, his eyes serious. "You are part of my survival strategy." The words stung, but they were honest. She respected that more than she expected. When the speeches began, Ethan stood near the stage. Maya stayed close, smiling for photographs, playing her role. She held a glass of water, while others toasted with champagne. The lights reflected off her bracelet, a small, simple piece she had bought at a street market years ago. It was the only thing she owned that felt truly hers. During a pause in conversation, a woman in a red dress approached. Her voice dripped with familiarity. "Ethan, it has been so long. Are you not going to introduce me to your new project?" Maya blinked. "Project?" Ethan's tone cooled. "Vanessa, this is my wife, Maya Carter." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Of course. Congratulations, darling. You must tell me, how does one go from scrubbing floors to marrying a Carter?" "I am dying to know the secret." Maya's cheeks burned. Every pair of eyes nearby turned toward her. For a second, she wanted to run. But then she remembered her promise to herself. "Stand tall." She lifted her chin and smiled. "The secret," she said calmly, "is being in the right place at the wrong time." The nearby guests chuckled softly, and Vanessa's smirk faltered. Ethan looked at Maya, genuinely surprised. He leaned closer and whispered, "Nicely done." As the night ended, they left the ballroom side by side. The city lights shimmered below, rain starting again, soft against the car windows. Neither spoke for a long time. "Finally," Maya said, "you did not have to defend me in there." "True." Ethan looked out at the wet streets. "I did not do it for you. I did it because they were wrong." She turned toward him, trying to read his expression. "You keep saying this is all business, but sometimes I think you forget that." He met her eyes briefly, then looked away. "Maybe I do." Sometimes. When they arrived back at the penthouse, Ethan stopped her at the elevator. "You handled yourself well tonight. You proved my point to everyone in that room." Maya gave a tired smile. "Which is that appearances can be powerful," he said quietly, "even when they are built on lies." The elevator doors closed between them, and she stood in the hallway for a moment, her reflection staring back from the polished metal. The gown still shimmered, the diamonds still sparkled, but inside, she felt the faint weight of truth. This was not a marriage, it was a transaction. Yet, somewhere in the spaces between his silence and her smiles, something real had started to breathe. The following week unfolded with quiet precision. Ethan returned to his long hours at the office, while Maya learned to navigate her new role in the strange, polished world she had stepped into. Every morning, she took breakfast alone in the vast kitchen, the city skyline glowing beyond the glass. Every evening, she heard Ethan's footsteps echo down the marble hallway long after midnight. They lived under the same roof, but their lives remained parallel lines that never met. Until one night, those lines crossed. It was nearly midnight when Maya heard a crash from Ethan's study. She hurried down the hallway, her bare feet silent against the cold floor. The door was slightly open. Inside, papers covered the floor. A glass lay shattered. And Ethan sat at his desk with his head in his hands. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. He looked up, his eyes red from exhaustion rather than tears. "Do I look all right?" Maya hesitated, then stepped closer. "What happened?" "The board wants to sell one of our divisions," he said. "It is a bad deal, but they will force it through if I do not agree. And my uncle Bite. He knows exactly how to corner me." She noticed a letter open on the desk, the same elegant signature at the bottom. Richard Carter. The words were cold, legal, and final. Maya bent down to gather the papers. "Then fight back. You do not seem like the kind of man who gives up easily." He gave a humorless laugh. "You think I have not tried? Everything I built could vanish with one vote. My father's company, his legacy, all of it." She placed the stack neatly on the desk. "Maybe you should stop fighting to protect your father's name and start fighting to protect your own." Her words lingered in the room, sharp and unexpected. Ethan stared at her, speechless for a moment. He had spent years surrounded by people who agreed with him, who feared him, who never dared to challenge him. But this woman, his fake wife, his employee, spoke with a calm strength that cut through the noise. Finally, he said, "You have no idea what it costs to be in my position." She met his gaze steadily. "You are right. But I know what it costs to have nothing. That is why I took this deal. And that is why you should not waste what you already have." The air between them shifted. For the first time, Ethan saw her not as a contract, but as a person. Someone who carried her own scars, her own quiet pride. He leaned back, exhaling. "You should go get some rest." Maya nodded but did not move. Instead, she reached for a sketchbook on the corner of his desk. It was hers, forgotten from the day she moved in. She flipped to a blank page, picked up a pencil, and began to draw. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Something that might help you remember why you started all this." She sketched quickly, her hand steady. When she turned the book around, Ethan saw himself sitting just as he was now, surrounded by shadows. But in the reflection of the window behind him, a faint sunrise was beginning to appear. "It is not finished," she said quietly, "but neither are you." Ethan stared at the drawing for a long time. His voice was lower when he spoke. "You have talent. It is just a way to breathe," she said, "when life feels too heavy." The next morning, Ethan left early for a board meeting. He carried the sketch folded carefully in his briefcase. That night, when he returned, there was a small vase of fresh flowers on the kitchen counter, and a note in Maya's handwriting. "You can do this." Something in him softened. For the first time in years, he did not feel completely alone in his own home. Days passed. They began to fall into a rhythm: morning coffee, shared without words, small conversations about the weather, laughter that slipped through the cracks when neither expected it. One Saturday, Ethan asked, "Do you miss your old job?" Maya smiled faintly. "Sometimes. At least the customers were honest. Coffee orders never pretend to love you." He laughed quietly, surprising them both. "You are impossible to predict, Mrs. Carter." She looked at him and said, "That makes two of us." For a moment, the air between them held something unspoken, fragile but real. Ethan looked away first, his expression unreadable. Later that night, he stood on the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below. He thought of her words, her sketch, her quiet defiance. The marriage had begun as a legal necessity, a shield against power and greed. But somewhere in the stillness of those late hours, It had begun to feel like something else, something dangerously close to truth. Inside, Maya lay awake, listening to the rain return. She did not know what was happening between them. She only knew that the walls she had built were no longer strong enough to keep her heart untouched. The following days moved quietly, but something unspoken pulsed beneath the surface of the Carter penthouse. Ethan buried himself in work, attending meeting after meeting, but his thoughts kept drifting toward the woman who had changed the atmosphere of his home. Maya, meanwhile, tried to keep her heart steady. She had promised herself that this arrangement was business, nothing more. Yet each time she heard his voice in the next room, that promise felt weaker. One evening, Claire arrived at the penthouse with a stack of folders and an urgent tone. "Mr. Carter, the board meeting has been moved to Friday. They are planning to vote on the merger." Ethan frowned. "That is 2 days earlier than scheduled." "They think you will not be ready," Claire said. Then her eyes flicked toward Maya, who was arranging fresh flowers on the table. "And there are rumors spreading about your marriage. Vanessa has been talking. The Pruses. To 3BAT. Maya froze. "Talking about what?" Claire hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "She told the press that your marriage is unconventional, that it may not be real." The air in the room turned heavy. Ethan's face hardened, his voice steady but cold. "Let her talk. Words do not scare me." But Maya saw the faint tremor in his hand as he picked up the folder. He was angry not just at Vanessa, but at the doubt she had planted. Later that night, Maya stood by the balcony, watching the city lights flicker through the rain. Ethan joined her, his jacket draped loosely over his shoulders. For a long time, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "You do not have to face this. If you want to end the contract early, I will still pay the full amount." Maya turned toward him, eyes wide. "You think I would run because of gossip?" He looked surprised. "Most people would." "I am not most people," she said softly. "You taught me that appearances can be powerful, remember? Then let us show them what real strength looks like." For the first time, Ethan did not have a reply. The next day, the world tested her words. The charity foundation where Ethan served as chairman held its annual gala, a grand, televised event filled with reporters and board members. Every year it was predictable, controlled, polished. But this time, tension ran through every corner of the room. Maya could feel it the moment they entered. Cameras flashed faster, microphones stretched closer, and questions flew sharper than ever. "Mrs. Carter, how long have you been married? Some say your relationship is a publicity stunt. Care to comment?" Maya's pulse quickened, but she held Ethan's hand tightly. His expression remained calm, but his silence gave her an unexpected clarity. She stepped forward, her voice clear and even. "Our marriage began with a contract," she said, the crowd gasping at her honesty. "But what I learned from Ethan is that love is not defined by paperwork. It is defined by actions. He may not be perfect, but he stands for what he believes in. That is real enough for me." The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Then the cameras started flashing again, but this time, the energy had changed. Ethan looked at her, stunned. For a man who built his life on control, he suddenly felt completely unguarded. He reached for her hand again, this time not out of duty, but gratitude. When they returned home that night, Maya slipped off her heels and sighed. "Well," she said, "I think I just ruined your PR department's week." Ethan smiled faintly. "On the contrary, you saved it." He paused, searching her face. "You did not have to defend me." "I was not defending you," she said softly. "I was telling the truth." Har. He looked at her for a long time, the distance between them shrinking until there was none at all. For a moment, the world outside disappeared. The cameras, the rumors, the contract. Then, quietly, Ethan said, "You have no idea what you have done to me, Maya." She smiled, a little sad, a little brave. "Neither do you." Outside, the city lights shimmered against the rain, and somewhere deep inside both of them, something shifted for good. The line between what was fake and what was real had blurred beyond recognition. The morning after the gala, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the penthouse, cutting through the soft mist that lingered over the city. Maya stood in the kitchen, stirring coffee she had already forgotten to drink. Her phone was buzzing with notifications, headlines spreading her speech from the night before. Some praised her courage. Others questioned every word. But she did not regret what she said. For the first time, she had spoken without fear. Ethan entered quietly, still in the dark suit from an early meeting. His voice carried a mixture of fatigue and warmth. "You are trending on 3 news sites," he said. "They are calling you the woman who spoke truth in a room full of power." Maya smiled faintly. "Is that good or bad?" "Both," he replied. "The board is divided. Half of them admire you. The other half think I have lost control." "How dey?" She met his gaze. "And what do you think?" He hesitated before answering. "I think you reminded me what honesty looks like." For a moment, they stood in silence, the city humming below. It felt strangely natural. 2 people who began as strangers now sharing quiet mornings like something real. Later that afternoon, Ethan asked her to accompany him to the company headquarters. It was the first time she had stepped into his world beyond the polished events and formal dinners. The office tower loomed over downtown, a sleek monument of glass and ambition. As they entered, heads turned, assistants whispered. Everyone had seen the news. In the boardroom, long tables gleamed under harsh white light. Richard Carter sat at the head, his expression cold. "I must say, nephew, you have an interesting way of running a business," he said. "Public confessions, emotional speeches. What is next? A reality show?" Ethan's tone remained calm. "What happened last night was not a show. It was integrity. Something this company was built on, even if you have forgotten." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Integrity does not pay dividends. Shareholders want results, not fairy tales." Before Ethan could answer, Maya spoke softly. "Then maybe that is why the company is losing its heart. You talk about profit, but people follow purpose." Richard turned toward her, his smirk sharp. "How touching." The housekeeper turned philosopher. "I?" Ethan's voice hardened. "Enough, Richard. She is my wife, and you will treat her with respect." The room went silent. For the first time, Ethan's words were not a performance. They carried weight, conviction, something real. After the meeting, as they walked toward the elevator, Maya glanced at him. "You did not have to defend me." He looked at her, his jaw still tense. "Yes, I did. Because you were right." Tutor. When they returned home that evening, the air felt different, lighter, warmer, more alive. Ethan loosened his tie, something he never did before. "You know," he said quietly, "for someone who claimed she was not staying long, you have managed to change everything around here." Maya laughed softly. "Maybe it needed changing." He studied her for a moment, then said, "Do you ever think about what happens after the contract ends?" Her smile faded. "Every day." "And?" he asked. She hesitated. "I tell myself it will not hurt when it is over. But I think that is a lie." Ethan's expression softened. "It hurts me too." Neither of them moved closer, but something between them had already shifted beyond the point of pretending. The silence that followed was no longer awkward. It was heavy with everything they could not yet say. Later that night, Maya sat by the window sketching again. The drawing showed the 2 of them standing under the same roof but reaching toward the same light. When Ethan passed by, he paused. "Is that us?" he asked. She nodded without looking up. "It is the truth we are afraid to admit." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Maybe it is time we stopped being afraid." The rain started again outside, soft against the glass, as if the world itself was listening. In that moment, both of them understood that their contract had already expired in every way that mattered, except on paper. The next morning began with the sound of Ethan's phone vibrating endlessly on the marble counter. Maya glanced up from her sketchbook as he answered. His face hardened immediately. "What do you mean she went to the press?" he said sharply. "Who authorized that?" Maya could not hear the voice on the other end, but she saw the change in his expression. When he hung up, his tone was clipped, almost cold. "Vanessa leaked the contract. The entire agreement. Every detail." Maya froze. "You mean everyone knows?" Ethan nodded. "The media has the documents. They will run it by evening." The words landed like thunder. The secret they had guarded for months was no longer theirs. The world would soon know that their marriage was built on paper, not promises. Within hours, the news spread. Every network carried the same headline: "Fake marriage, real scandal." Photos from the gala, clips from Maya's speech, even shots from outside their home flooded the internet. The comments were cruel and fast. Some called her a gold digger. Others mocked Ethan for being desperate. Reporters gathered outside the Carter building, microphones ready, hungry for confrontation. Claire called in a panic. "You need to issue a statement," she said. "The board is demanding answers." Ethan closed his eyes, exhaustion and anger tightening every line of his face. "They want blood," he muttered. Maya stood by the window, the city below flashing with camera lights. Her voice was quiet. "Let me take the blame. You have more to lose than I do." He turned toward her sharply. "No, I will not let them destroy you to save me. But this was your company, your name. And you were the only honest thing in it," he interrupted. "Do not ever think you are the problem." For the first time since they met, Maya saw him completely stripped of his control. The weight of pride, anger, and guilt pressed heavily on his shoulders. She wanted to reach for him, but stopped herself. The next morning, the headlines grew worse. Investors were pulling out. Stock prices dropped. Richard Carter demanded an emergency board meeting. "You have embarrassed this family enough," he told Ethan in front of the directors. "Step down. The company deserves someone who takes it seriously." Ethan looked around the table, then stood. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried quiet fury. "You want to talk about taking things seriously? I built this company when everyone else wanted to sell it for scraps. I turned it into something people could believe in again. And the only reason you want me gone is because I refused to sell it to your friends." Richard smirked. "And now, because of your little scandal, you have given me exactly what I need to remove you." Ethan said nothing more. He walked out of the meeting, leaving the boardroom echoing behind him. Back at the penthouse, he found Maya packing a small suitcase. Her hands shook as she folded a simple dress. "It is better if I go," she said. "They will calm down if I disappear." He stepped closer. "Do you really think leaving will make them stop?" Tears glimmered in her eyes. "Maybe not, but it will make it easier for you." Ethan's voice broke slightly. "You think any of this is easy without you?" She looked up at him, her heart aching. "It is not supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be temporary." He reached out, but she stepped back. "Please," she whispered, "do not make this harder." The elevator doors closed behind her, leaving him standing alone in the silence of the penthouse. The sketch she had left on his desk caught his eye, the two figures under one roof, reaching for the same light. He picked it up carefully, his throat tight. Outside, rain began to fall again, streaking the glass walls like quiet tears. The city kept moving, unaware that somewhere high above, two people who never meant to love each other had just broken the one rule they promised to keep: do not fall in love. 3 days passed since Maya left the penthouse, and Ethan's world grew quieter than he thought possible. The office calls kept coming, but he ignored most of them. His reputation had cracked, the company was in turmoil, and the woman who had somehow become the center of his life was gone. Every room in the penthouse echoed differently now. The flowers she used to replace weekly had wilted. The faint scent of her perfume still lingered near the balcony, mixed with rain and silence. Claire arrived that morning, her expression tense. "You cannot hide forever," she said. "The board meeting is tomorrow. Richard is preparing to take full control. If you do not fight back, you will lose everything." Ethan stared out at the city, his reflection in the glass barely recognizable. "Everything already feels gone," he said quietly. Claire placed a folder on the counter. "Then at least lose it with dignity, and maybe, just maybe, win it back." When she left, Ethan opened the folder. Inside were press releases, legal drafts, and the contract, the one that started everything. Maya's signature was clear, her handwriting delicate and steady. His thumb brushed over her name. He could almost hear her voice again. "You should fight to protect your own name." That afternoon, the rain returned, and something inside him shifted. He put on his coat and stepped out for the first time in days. Across the city, Maya was working quietly at a community art center. She had gone back to sketching, teaching children to draw. The whispers about her had not faded, but she kept her head down. Each evening, she cleaned the brushes, turned off the lights, and pretended she was fine. That night, as she locked the door, she heard footsteps. When she turned, Ethan was standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes tired but determined. "You should not be here," she said softly. "I had to see you," he answered. "I cannot let things end like this." Maya crossed her arms, trying to keep her voice steady. "Ethan, The world already decided what we are. Let it go. He took a step closer. They can say whatever they want. I am done hiding behind contracts and silence. Tomorrow, I am holding a press conference. I am telling them the truth. She looked at him, uncertain. What truth? That the contract was real, he said, but the love became real too. That I fell for you in ways I never planned. Maya shook her head, emotion breaking through her composure. Ethan, that will ruin you. He smiled faintly. Then let it. If losing everything is the price of honesty, I will pay it. The next morning, the lobby of Carter Holdings was filled with cameras. Reporters shouted his name as he stepped to the podium, calm and resolute. Yes, he said into the microphones, our marriage began as a legal agreement. But somewhere along the way, she taught me that love cannot be written into a contract or erased by one. He paused, the room silent. Maya Nguyen showed me what integrity looks like. If that cost me my position, so be it. By the time the conference ended, the boardroom was in chaos. Some called for his resignation, others quietly applauded. But for Ethan, none of it mattered. He had finally told the truth. When he returned home that night, he found a note waiting at his door. It was in Maya's handwriting. You did not need to prove anything. You already were enough. He held the note for a long time, then smiled for the first time in weeks. The storm outside began to ease, and the city lights flickered softly against the windows. Tomorrow would decide the future of his company. But for the first time, Ethan Carter no longer feared losing everything. Because he had already found the one thing he never knew he needed. The courage to love honestly. The morning of the board meeting arrived with clear skies, the first in weeks. The storm that had hung over the city finally broke, leaving the air fresh and calm. Ethan adjusted his tie in the elevator's mirrored wall, his reflection steady but changed. He was no longer the man who hid behind control and contracts. Today, he was ready to face everything, no matter the cost. When he entered the conference room, the directors were already seated. Richard Carter occupied the head of the table, confident and smug. You have made quite a spectacle, Richard said. The company has become a headline circus. The shareholders want resolution. Step down, Ethan, and spare what is left of your reputation. Ethan placed his folder on the table. No, he said simply. I will not step down. Richard laughed under his breath. You think the board will protect you after that confession? I'm not asking them to protect me, Ethan replied. I am asking them to remember why this company existed in the first place. My father built Carter Holdings on trust. Somewhere along the line, we traded that for greed. He opened the folder and handed out documents. While you were planning to replace me, I was negotiating a partnership that will secure us for the next decade. These are the final terms. The investors signed this morning. The only reason they agreed was because they believed in the speech I gave yesterday. They believed in honesty. The room went silent. One by one, the directors looked at the papers, then at Richard. The older man's expression darkened. You cannot win with words, he said. Ethan met his gaze. No, but I can win with integrity. The vote that followed was brief. When it ended, Richard stood abruptly and walked out, his empire slipping from his hands. The remaining members turned to Ethan. Congratulations, Mr. Carter, one of them said quietly. You have your company back. That evening, the sun sank low over the city. Ethan returned to the penthouse, now filled with soft light instead of silence. On the counter lay Maya's note, still folded, the edges worn from being read too many times. He looked at it one last time, then reached for his phone. When Maya answered, her voice trembled. Ethan, I had to tell you, he said. We won. The company is safe. But none of it means anything without you. There was a pause, then a soft laugh through her tears. You always know how to ruin a goodbye. Do you not? Then do not make it one, he said. Come home. Bye. Later that night, when she stepped into the penthouse, everything felt different. No boardroom tension, no contract papers, only warmth. Ethan waited near the balcony, the city lights behind him. I kept something for you, he said, holding out a small box. Inside was the same pearl necklace she had once left on his desk, the clasp repaired. It broke when you walked away, he said softly. So I fixed it, like everything else. Maya's eyes filled with tears as he took her hand. There is no contract this time, he said. Only choice. Will you stay? She smiled through the tears. For good this time. As he slipped the necklace around her neck, the city outside shimmered with quiet light. For once, there were no cameras, no headlines, no lies, only two people standing side by side, choosing love over fear. The man who once believed in control finally understood that real power was not in contracts or companies, but in the courage to care. And the woman who entered his life by chance had become the only thing he could never put a price on. In the calm after every storm, Ethan and Maya found what neither of them expected: a love that began as a transaction and ended as the truth.